Hey guys, and welcome back to Nico Dev. Throughout my entire channel, I made a lot of tutorials about Firebase, and more specifically, Firebase and Unity combined. Now, the first tutorials I've ever made on Firebase and Unity were done using the REST APIs. This means that instead of using the Firebase SDK, we were doing requests to certain endpoints, to trigger database events such as putting data in or retrieving data. And this is a pretty good system, and it works for any platform, because naturally, in any platform you can just do a request to a certain endpoint and get a response. I've also noticed that there are actually ways to stream from REST APIs, so if you work hard enough, there are also ways to set up observers and stuff like that to check when data has changed. But naturally, the Firebase SDK makes all of this so much easier, and Firebase actually has an SDK for Unity. Now, what's the problem with this SDK? The problem is that Firebase is targeted for mobile apps such as, Android apps or iOS apps. So the Firebase SDK only works for these platforms. There is actually a desktop workflow, but this workflow is in beta, and as you can see right here, it says that this feature is intended only for development and not for shipping code. So in theory, there is a way to use the Unity Firebase SDK and build a standalone app, but it's not recommended. Now, there is one thing though that you can never do using the Firebase SDK, and that is building a WebGL app. So if I go back in Unity, as you can see, and I go in build settings, and I go into WebGL, I can actually build a project for WebGL. Now, if I try to use the Unity SDK and build this project, it's gonna fail miserably. I'm gonna get a lot of errors, nothing is gonna work. Because naturally, the SDK was not done to work on a WebGL build. So what if you wanna make a game, and you want to use Firebase, and you want that game to be on WebGL, and you don't want to use the REST client APIs, because you need more services, and you need to do more complex stuff. And also maybe you need to use other services, not just real-time database, but for example you need to use Firebase storage, and as long as I know, there are no REST client API for that service. So how do you do this? Are you just stuck? Is there no way to do this? Well, for the longest time, I thought the answer was no, there is no way to do this. But recently, I actually found a way to actually incorporate this, to actually have the Firebase SDK in a WebGL build and making it work flawlessly. Now, I created a small example library that you can find in the description where you can basically do simple real-time database requests in a WebGL app. All of the code is available in the description, and it's really easy to install into your Unity project. And there are a lot of basic functions such as retrieving JSON, posting JSON, but also listening. Okay, let me see if I can zoom this up a little bit. Okay, that's too much, but okay. Let's see if this works, But also listening for child added to certain nodes. Listening to other events, or also running some simple transactions. So these are all functions that you can incorporate into your code really easily using my library. But in today's video, I'm gonna show you how this library works and how you can add your own functions for your own Firebase services, for your WebGL Firebase Unity app. So let's begin. First of all, I'm gonna show you the finished product, and there we go. As you can see, we have a path, and in the path we can do test path, and then we can just post some JSON on this path. We can just post hello and post the JSON, and it will say that hello was posted. Now, if I actually go to my real-time database console, as you can see, if I go right here, you will see that the data was actually posted, and this is working in WebGL. And this is not using REST client, it is actually using the Firebase JavaScript SDK. So I can also retrieve the JSON at the same location, and I'm gonna get hello, as you can see. And this is something you can also do with the REST API. Something you cannot do with the API, as long as I know, or something I never tried doing with such ease, is actually listening for changes in values. And as you can see now, I can listen for a value changed on the test path, and if I actually go here and change this value to anything else, and I get back here, as you can see I will get the updated value. And every time this changes, I'm gonna get the updated values, right away. You can also do transactions, and this means you can do race condition safe calls to the database. So as you can see, I can add an amount to this specific value. So as you can see, if I do this, now it's gonna be 5, and if I do it again, it's gonna be 10. And no matter how much I spam, as you can see, the value is gonna keep going up, and there is not gonna be any corruptions or any inconsistencies with the count, because it's a transaction. I mean, naturally, I can also add negative numbers and stuff like that, so as you can see, this is gonna happen. I can also do a boolean transaction, so this means that it's gonna be either true or false, so it's gonna be like a toggle. And yeah, I can also listen for other values being changed. These are all of the basic Firebase functions I've incorporated in the example, and you know, if you're doing a simple real-time database dump for your app or for your game, maybe just a simple scoreboard, this is all that you need. Now let's actually check out how I managed to do this. So the Firebase Unity SDK is a no-no. You cannot use the Firebase Unity SDK in WebGL. But WebGL actually works using JavaScript, because it's literally just a web page. And Firebase actually has an SDK just for JavaScript. So what I was thinking is, instead of using the Unity SDK for Firebase, let's use the JavaScript SDK for Firebase and somehow inject it into the finished WebGL build. Luckily for us, Unity has a way to do exactly this. I'm gonna leave this page in the description because it was really helpful to me. So what you can do is you can write JavaScript code and then you can execute it from C# in a WebGL build. So if we somehow manage to incorporate into this code the Firebase JavaScript SDK, we are all set, because we can just call these functions and we can interact with these to the Firebase real-time database. Alright, so let's do this. Following the documentation, all we have to do is create a folder, which is the plugins folder, and you can create this anywhere you want. And then you have to go to here and do open containing folder. Why does my file system crash? Let's try again. Thank you, file system, very kind. But yeah, here we are in our project folder, and then once you're here, you create a new document, and this document can be whatever you want. I'm gonna just name the class Firebase. Okay, and then it has to be, and you have to be careful here, it has to be .js lib, okay, because it's a JavaScript library. And then you can open this with whatever you want. I'm gonna open it with Visual Studio Code. Okay, for reference, I'm just gonna copy this code from the documentation and put it here, okay, and then I'm gonna clean it up a little bit. I'm gonna only leave this hello world function, okay, so we have it. So at the beginning of the file, there is to be this function which is merge into, and you need a library manager library. And then all of the functions that you put inside of this container, all of these are gonna be integrated into your Unity project. And remember, this file has to be under a plugins folder in your assets project, or else nothing is gonna work. And also it needs to have the JavaScript library extension. Okay, we're good, and this is how you make the function. You just do the name of the function, column, function, and then right here you put any arguments. For this example, we're just gonna do a function that retrieves a value from the database. We are gonna call this function getJSON, so we're gonna get the JSON from the database. Now, naturally, as the variables, we need a path, like where we want to get the JSON from inside our database. And we also need a few other parameters that I will explain in the future. Just give me a sec. For now, we are just gonna create them. We need an object name, and also we need a callback, and we need a fallback. All of these parameters are gonna be strings. Now, one thing to note, one thing I really stumbled my head on every time I tried to make this work, and I literally lost hours upon hours trying to figure out why this wasn't working. These strings are actually not parsed as string yet, so you cannot just use them normally throughout your code. You actually need to parse them first. I know, it's pretty weird, but the way you actually parse them is you create a new variable, at example parsed path, okay, and you need to do pointer stringify, and then inside you put the original parameter. And now you actually have a string that you can use in your code. If you don't do this operation, this string is actually gonna be a number. I know, it's really weird. Anyway, let's copy this code and do it for all of the parameters that we currently have. And also, don't worry about it, I will explain all of the other parameters right now. Just give me a sec. Alright, so we can have parsed object name. Now we're gonna remove this window alert, and we actually need to use the Firebase JavaScript SDK. Now, unfortunately, our editor, our IDE, in this case Visual Studio Code, cannot give us any advice on the code that we are writing, because currently the Firebase JavaScript SDK is not incorporated into our project, so naturally Visual Studio Code doesn't know what we're doing. So we just have to rely on our writing skills. But basically what you can do is firebase.database to access the real-time database library. And then we have to do ref, and right here we can put the parsed path. And then we can do once value. And this basically means read the value at this location once. And once this operation is done, so we do a then, we are gonna have a function, and this function is gonna return a snapshot, which is basically gonna be the value that we retrieve. And this function is gonna do this code that we write right here. And this is gonna happen if everything goes correctly. When we go here, okay, we actually need to send back the data that we received from the database. We need to send it back to Unity. Right now we are in JavaScript. We need some way to communicate to Unity. Luckily, there is a function that can do just that. We can basically invoke the Unity instance, okay, .module, and we can do the function .sendMessage. Now, to explain this simply, basically what this function does is it calls a method from your Unity scene, okay? Basically, what you have to tell the function is the name of the game object you want to invoke, okay? So, let's say an example, my main camera, okay? So let's do an actual example of this, okay? Let's create a script, and the script is gonna be just test, okay? And inside this script that I'm gonna open up, okay, this is our script. Let's delete all of this. Inside this script, we're just gonna have a function, and we're gonna call this my function. And now this function is just gonna do, I don't know, some basic stuff like, I don't know, debug.log test. Okay, now let's actually take this script and put it into our main camera, okay? So our main camera is also gonna have the test script. Now, if we want to invoke this function right here from our JavaScript code, all we need to do is do this sendMessage function. But this sendMessage function actually needs some parameters. The first parameter that it needs is the name of the game object whose script is, added as a component. In this case, the name of the game object is gonna be our main camera. So right here, I can put main camera. And then, what I also need is the name of the method, okay? And in my case, the method is named myFunction. So this is gonna be my function. And then, this is optional, but I could also have a parameter that I pass this function. Now, there can only be one parameter, and it needs to be a primitive parameter, so it can be either a string, or an integer, or a char, but it needs to be primitive. In my case, it's gonna be a string, and it's gonna be the snapshot.val. And this is actually a JavaScript object, and this is the JSON that I get back from the request. I actually want to transform this into a JSON, so I can just do JSON stringify this. Alright, so every time the request goes through successfully, I am gonna call the function that is inside the main camera, which is this one, and I'm gonna pass it a value, which is gonna be this one. So right here, let's actually say that it accepts some value. And then it will debug.log this value. Now, for the specific example where this function right here is located inside the main camera, this code is gonna work. But naturally, if I change this function's name or this function location, this code will no longer work. So to make this system better, we could actually make these two parameters actual variables so we can modify them from the C# code. And this is why these parameters are here. Instead of main camera, right here we're gonna put object name, so this parameter right here, and instead of my function, this is gonna be our callback. Also, we can surround our code in a try-catch statement. And if there are any errors, like this error right here, we are gonna catch the error and we're gonna send it back to Unity. So we can just copy this code right here, and we're gonna do object name, but instead of callback, we're actually gonna do a fallback now, and instead of sending the data, we're actually gonna send the error message. And maybe we can say something like there was an error, column, and then pass the error. Alright, and this actually doesn't have to be like this. Good. And I think we are done with our function, and we are calling Unity once the function actually gets executed, and we are actually getting back the data that we want, which is basically the Firebase snapshot at the location that we decided. Now let's go back into our C# code and let's actually learn how to call this function from C#. For now, let's actually remove this test function right here. What you need to do is you actually have to add a reference to the JavaScript function into your C# code. And this is the syntax to make it happen. Basically, you have to do DLL import __ internal, and okay, right here I need another parenthesis, and let's actually import this. It needs to be using system runtime interop services, and then we can declare our function. Make sure that the parameters of the functions match the parameters you put into the JavaScript. So in this case we have a path, object name, callback and fallback, and they're all string. Also, the name of the function has to match the name of the function in the JavaScript. And you need to make this an extern void, which basically means that this function needs to be accessed from an external library. In our case, our JavaScript library that we created. Okay, great, and now we can call this function from our C# code. Now, if you remember correctly, this script is actually in our main camera, in our main scene, so this script is gonna be loaded as soon as we, hit play. So what we can do is we can add the function start, okay? So everything inside this function will be loaded as soon as we hit play, and we can actually call this function right away. So we can do get.json, and then we can define a path. We're just gonna use an example path, it's gonna be example, and then we need the object name. And for the object name, we can just do gameObject.name, which in our case will always be main camera. And then we need a function for the callback and a function for the fallback. Let's just do it right now. Let's create a new function, okay? This is gonna do on request success, at example, and it's gonna have the data. And then we're gonna have another function which is gonna be on request failed, and it's gonna have the error. And right here we're gonna do another string which is gonna be on request success, and right here we're gonna have the fallback which is gonna be on request failed. And now we are correctly calling this function and we are referencing these two other functions. Okay, so if the request goes through successfully, we need to display on screen the data. So what we can do is we can just create a text, and we can do text, I don't know. Great, and then we can just copy this text and change the text of this text field to the data. And also let me change the text color to a green color, just so we know everything went well correctly. Instead, if there are any errors, let's change the text to the error text, and also let's make the color of the text red. Great. Now all we need to do is go back into our sample scene, where everything is taking place, and let's actually create a new text field. There we go, right here. Let's actually make the text field take over the entire screen, so we're not gonna mess with any data. Let's actually make it centered, and maybe, I don't know, yeah, this is fine, right? I can see it. Okay, it's pretty bad because I'm not using TextMesh Pro, but it's alright. Let's remove the text for now, and let's actually add to the main camera a reference to this text. Now, naturally, you don't want the script to be in the main camera. This was just an example. You want the script to be maybe in another object. Actually, let's just do that, okay? Let's create a new empty object, and let's call it Firebase Handler. And let's remove the script from here, and let's actually put it in the Firebase Handler. Oh, this actually moved it. Okay, this is pretty great. And then we already have the reference to the text. Good. And we actually don't need to modify anything in our code, because in our code we were using gameObject.name. So this gameObject.name right here is gonna be Firebase Handler now, and everything is gonna still work correctly. Okay, great. And now in theory what you would think is that we can just hit play and it is just gonna work. But you'd be wrong, because if we try to hit play, it's gonna give us an error. It's gonna be entry point not found, get.json. Basically, this file right here that we created only gets loaded in once we actually build our WebGL project. So we cannot actually test this in the editor, unfortunately. What we need to do is do build settings, WebGL, switch platform, and then we need to build for WebGL in order to actually test our project. And usually it takes like 2-3 minutes to build a WebGL project. So I'm just gonna, pause the recording, and I'm gonna be back once this is done. Oh, okay, sorry guys, it wasn't making me build. As you can see, the build failed, but just because I made a really stupid mistake. Because this is JavaScript, you don't actually need to define the types in the parameter, so you don't have to put string at the beginning. You were probably all screaming at me because you were like, Nico, what are you doing? But no, now we should be fine. Oh, and I'm also dumb. I also found another mistake, but I guess this is what it is when you actually code without, you know, having any parsing. Right here we're using object name, but actually we need to use the parsed one, or else nothing is gonna work. And also we need to use the parsed callback and a parsed fallback. So I built it and it didn't work, and now I just realized why this wasn't working. Okay, now for the last time, can I finally build and can this finally work? Okay, finally it worked, and as you can see, once we actually load the app, there is gonna be an error. The error is Firebase is not defined. Now, this is really to be expected because we wrote our code right here expecting to know what Firebase is, but then we actually never incorporated the Firebase library. But don't worry, it's really easy to incorporate and we're gonna do it right now. Now, all you have to do is go to this page, which is also in the description, which is gonna guide you through how to do exactly this. In my case though, I only have to go to the Nico the Bot console, which is basically the project that I'm using. I have to go in the settings, go to project settings, and right here, as you can see, I already have an app incorporated because I already did some testing. We're gonna add another app, and it needs to be a web app, okay? And then you can write the name, it's gonna be just test, okay? We have to do register app, and now there is add Firebase SDK, which is basically what we're gonna do. As you can see, we have this code right here, and all we have to do is copy it, and then we have to go inside our Unity project, okay? In my case, my project is test. Go where we actually built our WebGL page. I built it in builds, test, okay? And this is my WebGL page. Actually open the index.html file, and right here in the body, at the end of the body, like before the end of the body, right here, you paste what you actually copied from this screen right here. And let's actually parse it. Okay, this is good. Now, as you can see right here, it says to do, add the SDKs for Firebase products that you use. Now, in my case, the only product that I'm using for this video is a real-time database, okay? But naturally, if you want to expand this and maybe add more functions inside the file, like I did, you can also use authentication, storage, anything you want. In my case, I only need a real-time database. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into the reference again, and I'm gonna go to step 5, and as you can see right here, we have all of our libraries. We need to get these ones, okay? And I need to get the one for real-time database, which is this one. I'm gonna just copy this code right here, okay? There is also the copy button. I'm gonna go back down, and down here, I guess I can put it down here. Here, I can just put it. And great, I can just save. And now, since I saved the new index.html, I can go back into my WebGL player, I can refresh the page, and now it should work. Okay, and as you can see, as we reload the page, we are gonna get a result of null. And the reason we get this result is because naturally, on the example endpoint or path, there is nothing. But if in the example path we actually put some data like an example test, if we reload the page, we are gonna get test. In fact, as you can see, we're gonna get exactly that. And also, if right here we put more complicated data, let me delete this, like our example, and then inside we can put test, then we can put another value, test2, and this is gonna be 1, this is gonna be a string, something like this. If we reload, we're gonna get the entire JSON. And there you go. So yeah, this is just a simple get function, nothing really too complicated, it's just one function, but you can add more function to this by just doing this and, you know, writing your own code in JavaScript. And down here you can use any any Firebase JavaScript SDK service that you want. And then you can use the Unity instance send message to communicate back to Unity, while in the Unity editor you can use this syntax right here to communicate to the JavaScript function. And just like this simple example that we made, you could make literally anything that you want to do with the JavaScript SDK, you can translate it into C#. All of the useful links to make this work are gonna be in the description, but I wanted this video to be just a kinda overview video on the way that I managed to do this, which is pretty straightforward if you ask me. Anyway, yeah, this is it. I don't think I have anything more to say about this project. I hope you really enjoyed it, and if you have been struggling making a WebGL app work, hopefully this will help you out. Anyway, that said, I hope you really enjoyed this video. Leave a like if you did, and subscribe to the channel if you're new and you enjoyed this content. And I guess I'm gonna see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much for watching till the very end, and I will see you later. Bye!